ahead, Suzanne.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So welcome everyone to this webinar that's kicking off the UN's 16 Days of Action on Violence Against Women. I'm Suzanne Heron. I'm the governor of the Western Canada region of SIA and a proud member of SI Victoria West Shore. And I would like to acknowledge that many of us here, at least in the Americas, are meeting from traditional and unceded territories of the indigenous peoples that call this land home. I myself am speaking from the island of Hawaii, which is the traditional land of the Sliaman Nation. And we do this to reaffirm our commitment and responsibility to acknowledge the harms and mistakes of past settlers and to move forward in partnership with Indigenous communities in the spirit of reconciliation, which has to be based on mutual trust, respect, and reciprocity. And Estatira, will you introduce yourself, and I will take over admitting people as they come in.
That's wonderful. Thank you very much. Just give me 1 second. So if you can unmute yourself, Susan, that would be, you mute yourself, that would be great. So hello, everyone. My name is, oh, I'm not in the spotlight. That's what I'm trying to do. You know, we do all this work with Zoom, but when it comes to the actual work, sometimes we have this challenge. So my name is Estatira Shirkodai, and I'm the president of Soroptimist International of Toronto. It is a great pleasure for me to be with you tonight. Thank you for joining us from different parts of the world. And I would like to acknowledge that we do have presidents, governors, and we're waiting for SI president to join us. We do have, as I can see, we do have Governor Suzanne, as she introduced herself, and SIA past president, if I'm not wrong with the pronunciation, Dawn Marie Lemond. Is that correct? I hope that I pronounced the name correctly. So we do have a very interesting program for you tonight, and I hope that you will enjoy it. There are different forms of violence against women, as we know, including honor killing, femicide, acid attacks, domestic violence, sexual assault, and missing and murdered Indigenous women. But the goal of tonight's webinar is specifically focusing on sex trafficking and non-state torture. But before we get started, I would like to launch a poll to see where everyone is joining us from. And I would appreciate if all of you can answer the questions on the poll. Can you see the poll? Okay, go ahead.
Estatira, I'm having a hard time answering for some reason.
Oh, does everyone have the same challenge?
You have to pull a little bar on the right-hand side. You pull it up and down and get to give you 4 questions, the 4 of them.
Yeah.
Okay.
How is everyone feeling? Is it working? Thank you.
It's working for me.
Yes, I have some people who have answered the question. Yes, thank you.
Oh, yeah.
So I think everyone has answered the question. So I'm going to end the poll now, and I'm going to share the results so you can see the results. Okay, let's have a look at the details. Okay, so can you see the results on the screen, everybody? Yes?
Yes.
Okay, so that's great. We do have from different places. We have from California and from Mexico. Thank you very much. And I can see that a large number of the attendees are Soroptimists. It's exciting to have you all. And again, one of the reasons that we do have this poll is we want to see how you feel after our great speaker talks about the advocacy work and how how this webinar is going to be helpful in terms of our future efforts. So I would like to stop sharing the results, and I would like to introduce our first speakers. Our first speakers are Linda and Jean. So if I can go ahead and talk about Linda and Jean. So Linda and Jean are registered nurses who started working on non-state torture almost 30 years ago. Their stories of working with women who had experienced unbelievable forms of torture by non-governmental institutions here in Canada and some parts of the globe is captured in the book that they wrote called Women Unsilenced. I will now pass it on to Linda and Jean. The floor is yours.
Okay, so I'm Linda and Jean will follow afterwards. And
okay, just give me a second so I can have you in the spotlight, okay?
Okay. I'll talk, well, she's doing that. We're not registered anymore. We're retired, but we were registered and for a long time. And how we started our work is we started a 1 night a week practice in Nova Scotia, starting with one woman who identified as being tortured by her family. So non-state torture is a crime that's perpetrated by non-state actors, which means family, human traffickers, pimps and buyers in prostitution, pornography. Taliban are non-state actors. People who force girls into child marriage are non-state actors. So there's different forms of non-state actors around the world and different forms of torture. It's a global reality. So I'll screen share now, and we'll start our PowerPoint. Hopefully you can you see that? So
Yes.
can you see okay? All right, good. So non-state torture really is the most globally underreported violent crime perpetrated against women and girls. And the reason why it's the most unreported is because it's still basically invisible. So if people don't know that it exists, or many of the victims, the women who endure non-state torture, don't even know the name of the term. So it's not a crime anywhere in the world, or very few places. So if you don't have a crime, you don't have reports, you don't have data. So it's a very invisible crime. And Jean and I are working very hard to make it visible globally. And that's what we'll be talking about tonight. And from here on in, you can talk about it with people that you know and share this knowledge. Now I'm trying to get it to move there. So it's a specific crime. And if you look at the classification of crime for a statistical analysis, you have to have 4 different categories. One is the behaviors or actions of the perpetrators. You have to define those. In this case, that's the non-state torturers. I'll tell you what the actions are in a minute. You have to define the perpetrator's intentionality. And with torture, it's never accidental. And neither is the tools of torturing. So it's a very intentional, deliberate act that can never be seen as an accident. So that's a really important component of torture of any kind, state or non-state. And you have to define who are being victimized by the perpetrators. In this case, Jean and I, we've talked to thousands of women and girls. Well, women, we've only talked to one 17-year-old, but they were girls when they were tortured. So their daughters, sisters, spouse, women from all walks of life. and to define the relationship between the perpetrators and the persons that they torture. So when I said families, one of the predominant perpetrators that we know of are the parents or other family members. And they're like-minded family members, such as aunts, uncles, grandmothers, grandfathers. They can be groups, gangs. So organized crime gangs are another form, biker gangs, human traffickers, as I mentioned, and the pimps and buyers, pornographers. Your employer can be a torturer. So there's many different kinds. And I mentioned the Taliban, the priests who torture, priests and nuns, like the school in Ontario, Port Alberni, where the children were electric shocked in the electric chair in the residential schools. They're non-state torturers. So it just kind of broadens your mind about what non-state torture is. And we've defined it as 3 different categories. So we have the classic non-state torture, and these are the acts that the torturers do in all the 3 categories and more. But they're basically the same as state torture acts, but they're done by the parents and partners that we mentioned before. So there's electric shocking, being beaten, burned, cut, whipped, being immobilized in some form, such as hung or caged, water tortures, being dunked in water and forced not to breathe, suffocation and chokings, sexual tortures, such as gang rapes or bestiality, chemical torture and drugging, deprivations of food and water and cold, extremes of heat and cold, psychological tortures of dehumanization, degradation, and horrification, forced nakedness, forced to witness the others being tortured, which women tell us is very difficult, and a profound sense of powerlessness in the torture pain, and ritualisms, sadodrama, and different pleasures. So that's category 1, or classic non-state torture. Then there's commercial-based, which is more human trafficking or prostitution and pornography, or snuff movies, which is where they actually film live video of a person being murdered online, or domestic workers can be tortured by their employers. And these are all commercial-based because there's money or profit involved in the torture. And category 3, where there's social cultural norms or traditions or religious-based, people use the excuse of culture, like FGM or child marriage or acid burning and widow burning. But as we know, the United Nations says that culture is never an excuse for abuse. We would add and torture either. So there's many countries now where FGM is illegal, and we know that FGM occurs in Canada, and so does child marriage. Acid burning and widow burning are decreasing, and those are all recognized forms of torture by the United Nations, the social cultural norms. And this is a questionnaire that Jean and I developed that when people come and contact us and want to know more about torture, non-state torture, we ask them to fill out this questionnaire if they would like to. And it includes 48 different forms of different acts of non-state torture that they can click off, see how many different kinds of torture that they've endured. And it really helps them to see that they're part of a global response, that many women from around the world have endured these, and it makes them feel not alone, makes them feel understood and validated. And they use this often to explain to others what has happened to them, and they can fill in an extra box describing ones that we haven't got listed. So you can see Sarah, for instance, the first woman that Jean and I worked with, she had all of those 48. She lived for 25 years in captivity, torture, and she's free now and healing. So that's a success story. Now it's Jean's turn. Are you there, Jean?
So I'll just take off from where Linda ended up. And I just want to share the reason why we always share the presentation is we know it's healthy to talk. It's healthy to explain our experiences. It's healthy to know that you have the freedom, that we have the freedom to speak. And We've practiced this of sharing, even if it's only 3 minutes. We try to each have a moment to express our voice. So that's why you see that we both share, because the other reason is the journey that we've had over the last almost 30 years. It's been a difficult one in many ways, because non-state actor torture back in 1993 when we started was not even on the radar.
What are you doing?
The system just thought that women and girls were not tortured. So human rights instruments did not even take that into consideration. So there's been massive, there's a block on that. Linda, are you on the?
Yeah, Estatir asked me to make the picture bigger, but I can't seem to make it any bigger.
No,
This-
you're going to put some up in a second.
Yeah, I didn't know if she was talking about this one or some of the others. That's okay. Go ahead.
Okay. So there was no recognition at all. So there's been global invisibility, and that's why we're working really hard to make it visible. So women and children, when they try to tell, they'll be understood. But if we don't understand the degree of harm that can go on, like in sex trafficking, who's going to think, well, it's torture trafficking from the population that we know, but it still gets invisibilized as so-called sex trafficking. So this is a postcard that a woman, Elizabeth Gordon from the UK, drew of 29 examples, 129 examples of everyday torture tools that could be used in the home. So Linda's going to bring up a few examples. Cigarettes, a clothes hanger, cigarettes for burning, a clothes hanger. We've had people tell that what they do with the clothes hanger, they make a whip out of it. They take it apart and they use it to whip. And a woman who was tortured by her husband and his 3 friends said it never left very many marks. So it was so-called an effective tool for them to use. Now, a bed and a light bulb. The bed, when we talk about torture being immobilized, women and girls, when they were children, they said they were tied to a bed. And sometimes a plastic sheet was put on the bed underneath when they were being tortured, so the mattress would stay clean. So when Linda said it's intentional, what they do is very intentional. The light bulb, a woman told us that when she was a tiny little girl, they used to put a hot light bulb into her vagina. So that's something that you would not think about. So the camera, often pictures were taken of them, pornographic crime scenes, child to child when they were forced to if you will, harm each other, even though that was not their choice. And a belt was for beating or whipping. And the last one, last 2, okay. The toilet is the water torture. Women talk about when they were little or as adults that their head was held in the toilet, in the sink. If they were out on the land, in a brook, in a lake, a woman was taken to the cottage in front of a lake. So they used to try to threaten her that she was going to be drowned with water torture. And the Smarties are pills because there's constant chronic drugging for the tortures that we have come to know. Because what it does, it keeps a child quiet. It keeps them, if you will, powerless in many ways. And it makes them question what's happening to them if they're polydrugged. So there are many other pictures in there, but it's just to have your mind think about what is in a home that could be used so that one could understand that non-state torturers have access to many types of tools in the everyday sense. So the next one, Linda. So around human trafficking, one has to remember that there's always a network. You can't traffic a person unless there's a network. So when a person is identifying that they've been trafficked, they've got multi-perpetrators. There's a whole network that they're dealing with. And it's the same for the women that we've come to know who have been exploited, tortured, and trafficked by their family. So this is the example of defining a crime. You have the first picture is of Sarah. Her non-state act torturers were a father and a mother and a government employees. So that's the issue of who the perpetrators are, who the torturers are. So the relationship was that she was a daughter and of the mother and father, but the government employees were friends of the mother and father. So that's like a group, if you will, and a very organized and very secretive, really, because they've been so invisible. And the next one image is of Lynn. She married a man. She was really groomed because he knew what his plan was, what it was to marry her, and with 3 other male friends was to keep her captive and torture her and traffic her. And that's exactly what happened. She's from our province, from our community, and she was taken to Ontario and kept captive, handcuffed to an iron radiator for 4.5 years before she escaped. And she was group raped with one episode with a knife, and she started to hemorrhage. And she was taken to what she called the pig doctor. So that's the network again, that criminal informal network, because they cannot function without a network. So one always has to think that when we think of sex trafficking, you might think one-on-one, but that's not how it really works. There's a whole network that goes on. And we personally don't use the term sex trafficking because it's a whole human being that's being trafficked. But I know that's the everyday language, but generally it's very violent. When you're being trafficked, you don't have a choice of what's happening to you. So there's a crime always going on. So the language is really important, what it does to make things invisible. And the third person is Elizabeth. She was a daughter, and her perpetrators were a father and a mother and an uncle. And what they did, her drawing below is how they sold her when she was 5 years old. And you can see like an envelope exchanging. She doesn't know what was in the envelope, but there was some kind of negotiation that had gone on there. So that's the criminal informal network. And the next one, Linda.
Oops, sorry.
So the non-state torture victimization, we always call it victimization, traumatization, because the trauma comes as a consequence of the victimization. The crime that's committed is what people are trying to tell, that we have to listen. And this is why we are very insistent that we identify that there's been a crime going on. There's been a victimization ordeal. So this is our book, Women Unsilenced, and we've spent quite a bit of time in the book explaining the modus operandi, or the behaviors, or the intentionality, the purpose, what they're doing in the relationship. And in this case, we talked about the ritualism tactics, because psychologically often they can use some form of ritualism that psychologically entraps them even deeper into thinking that what's happening to them is correct, if you will, or that the perpetrators are all powerful in some way. So that exerts the domination and the control and the captivity. It's even visible captivity. It's something like domestic violence. A woman can be beaten in her home and goes to work in the daytime, if you will, and people may not know that she's being victimized. So we can have visible captivity, and often that's not understood. So it, ritualisms, often they may dress up, they may go in front of a camera and take pornographic victimization images. They have fun and pleasure, because people ask us, why do they do what they do? You have to understand it's fun and pleasure for them. And the condition that the women that we've worked with, they've been often conditioned to self-harm. And what that does, that means they have chronic non-state torture re-victimization. And even they may be taught, the women have told us, to die by suicide. So the risk for femicide is very invisible femicide, if you will, that's not understood, that's what was going on, that they were conditioned to die by suicide, but the perpetrators escape because we haven't understood a conditioned femicide. And the reason we brought up the rituals is just a couple of days ago, Linda was looking for information and found out that a new paper that was just released, they were looking at how ritualisms are used to control in human trafficking. And out of 3,087 studies that they looked at, only 24 met that criteria, and one was ours. So it's just to value the qualitative participatory research is so important.
And the Helen Bamber Foundation is a world respected foundation, so they did the research.
Yeah, they did. And Helen Bamber, actually, Linda and I kind of relate to her because she started helping Second World War individuals who were Jewish generally, I think, because there was no service for them, and she just built up and built up and built up until now. She died a few years ago, but she has a foundation. So the last slide, Linda's going to show the walkthrough exhibition. Just last week, there was a Stop Non-State Torture, Enforce the Human Rights of Women and Girls exhibition. And we did 15 little videos for it. And because it was all online, we asked them if they would do a little walkthrough so that we could show people how the exhibition was presented, what the drawings of some of the women that we've collected that they've given to us, how that was shown. And actually, this is Caroline, one of the videos of her talking is where this video starts.
Yeah, it was at the UN in Vienna, and they used our book as the foundation for the trying to get out of the screen share now to be up there. Okay, to show you the video. It's just a few minutes long. The video is, if I can get there. So there's not a lot of talk in it, and they're just walking around. So you'll just see like a visual of what the video or what the walkthrough was for the exhibit.
Linda, I can share the actual video after you're done with the walkthrough.
Can you see it now?
Here.
Can't see it?
No, we can see it. I was just saying we cannot hear what Caroline is saying. It's just a
Oh,
one.
yes, okay.
So I
sure.
will share it later because we do have the time.
Okay, great. That's a great idea. Great idea. These are just posters that we made along the way. And these are the some of the pieces. That's our book there, and open to the page around non-state torture and victimization, traumatization, informed care. And these are live images from the poster that Gina talked about. Pencil, there's rope. That's the light bulb that Jean mentioned. Right up a camera. People could stop and watch the videos of the 15 different people talking.
Those who have survived non-state torture. And that with education, the public will demand that non-state torture be made a crime in countries where it is already. That way, those who torture children and women with no
She's Canadian, that woman talking.
Non-state torture, human rights violations, awareness to remedy and a demand for change. There is strength in numbers.
These are the drawings that they've sent us over the years and helping them to understand what they endured as non-state torture.
Hi, my name is Robert Holliday. My wife is Alexandra Lane, and she's a victim of non-state.
We have lots of drawings from women all around the world.
I'm making this video for the community. I've been working tirelessly over the years to bring awareness and visibility to non-state torture.
That's around Article 5, that no one should be subjected to torture. Convention on Human Rights. Very powerful images, aren't they? So that's the video, and it was young students that did it. They felt very, and Jeanette West.
It
Oh, wait,
states
no,
says,
getting
I
there,
cannot
stop
fully
that.
heal as
Sorry,
long as my words are not.
there. Now if I get out of here, I'll stop sharing.
So do you want me to go ahead and share the video for you?
If you want to, sure.
Yes,
that-
I think that's important to watch the video. Just give me 1 second. I'm just pulling it up here for you. So for some reason, Caroline hasn't been able to make it, but I'm just gonna play a video of her and you can watch what she has to say. Can everyone see the screen?
Yes,
Okay, perfect. Let's go.
it's probably have to start it at the beginning though.
I think,
Oh, I started with Caroline, but I can definitely go.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. Yeah, that's right. You're right. I thought you just said Carolyn's alone. No, you don't need to start at the beginning.
I live in Canada right now. I'm a survivor of 8 years of human trafficking and non-state torture. I think, in fact, I know that non-state torture needs to be acknowledged, recognized, and addressed because it's real and it's an added component to whatever someone is going through with an abuser or a trafficker. And I think also that it should be on the law books and it should be an added charge. It needs to be recognized from that perspective and the punishment that should go with it. I had private body parts amputated as punishment. I'm working with women who've had horrific things done to them that go above and beyond what somebody might call domestic abuse or trafficking. And many of them cannot recover from that, what was done to them. And justice needs to be given to these people. I'm talking men and women, although I primarily am working with women, but I know men that have been brutalized by torture that was inflicted from a non-state entity or persons. It's essential that it's recognized, and it's essential that the suffering of myself and those others doesn't go unanswered for. And it hasn't been in vain. Please let our suffering have come, some good come from it, because I like to talk about taking purpose from the pain. And so I'm taking that purpose here today to talk to you about this and say to you, please acknowledge that it exists and please acknowledge that these people need some form of justice. And you can do that by acknowledging it and recognizing it. So please, please help me and the others that are currently going through it, and those that are going to go through it, because it's not stopping. It's not stopping until there are ramifications and repercussions for it. So please make the effort, take the time to learn about it, educate yourself, and talk to others about it. And perhaps even if the only thing you do is talk to one other person about this, you'll have done something. And perhaps by doing that, you can prevent somebody else from going through it. Thank you.
Linda, do you want me to play just a little bit of this second one as well, or do you?
Not if you don't have time. You don't.
Okay, so
yeah.
thank you. So I'm just gonna stop sharing, and then I'm gonna hand it over to Suzanne. Thank you very much, Linda and Jean, for the great work that you do and for sharing your valuable work with us. So before we move on and before we go to the next part, I would like to ask everybody to get ready. What would be one takeaway or one action that you would take after listening to Linda and Jean? I would like to ask everybody to get ready. Put it in the chat, but don't send it right now. I want everyone to get into the chat. What is the takeaway from what Linda and Jean just mentioned, or what's your action? And don't send it now. We're going to have a chat bomb on the count of, let's say, 3. I will ask everyone to send it out. This is just to make it more fun. So if you can all type in, I'm just going to give you 1 minute to type in, but please don't send anything now. Just wait. And then when we say go, everybody, please send your text in the chat. Okay. 1 minute. That's okay. We haven't started, Leanne. That's fine. You still have time to type, but don't press enter. You can type in your comments, whatever takeaway or whatever action you would like to take. Please put it in the chat, but don't click send. Yep.
Estatira, can you please repeat what we're supposed to? I kind of lost.
Yes. What is the takeaway? Or what is the action that you would like to take after you heard about what is going on, what you heard about non-state torture? Because at the beginning, I had a small poll about how comfortable people are, how much they know about these topics. So at this point of time, I want to see what is your takeaway or what is the action that you will take. Okay, and it can be one sentence, it can be a few words. Don't worry about that. It can be just a few words. And now I would like to ask everyone, please click send so we can see whatever everyone has to send. Thank you very much. And I would like to give you some time to go through what everyone has put in. Excellent. Awesome. Yes, I saw that someone was talking about, advocacy, making appointment with local MP. And you know what? We are going to have some wonderful speakers who are going to talk more about the Soroptimist advocacy work. And Suzanne, I'm just going to hand it over to you at this point of time. Thank you very much, Linda and Jean, for your wonderful work and sharing that with us. We really appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, that was just kind of an explosion of awareness and aha, and certainly so for me. So wow, and thank you everyone for sharing that. And now we have a real treat. I see that Dilpreet, your hand is raised. So do you want to unmute yourself for a moment and speak?
I just have one question for Linda and Jean, because I have like.
Okay, let me just interrupt you. Can you hold on to that or write that in the chat? Because
sure.
After we have Sam and Janneke present, then we're going to have an opportunity for everybody to ask questions of all the speakers.
Just to make sure that Linda and Jean are going to be on the call with us, right, Jean and Linda?
Okay, I see heads nodding.
Okay,
Yes,
I thought they're leaving, so that's good. That's
Yeah,
good.
Thank
Okay.
you. Thank you
Great.
very much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. So now it is my pleasure to introduce Sam Bucano, a Soroptimist on a mission to empower women and girls. Soroptimist is Soroptimist. Well, we don't all necessarily know what Soroptimist is, but I say it's the best women's organization in the world, actually the best organization in the world. And Sam is a proud member of SI Valley de Oro, where she has served as president, also governor of the Desert Coast region, president of SIA, the Federation, chair of the Fundraising Council, and she's currently on our Donor Relations Task Force. And who would not donate when Sam comes to call? She is also an active participant of STAT, which is, with the exclamation point afterwards, Soroptimists Together Against Trafficking, and co-creator of the Soroptimist San Diego County Live Your Dream Collaborative, which sounds really interesting. But today she is going to tell us the story of STAT, and it's a true example of Soroptimist clubs working together to change the lives of survivors of sexual exploitation, human trafficking, and torture. So Sam, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Suzanne, and thank you all for inviting me to be with you this evening. I'm attempting to share my screen. Let's see how this goes. Are you seeing my screen?
Yes, great.
I hope. Oh, excellent. And I hope you can all hear me. STAT, Soroptimists Together Against Trafficking, is a rather loosely organized collaboration or cooperative, currently consisting of members belonging to approximately 10 Soroptimist clubs throughout San Diego County in Southern California. This is a flexible number. Sometimes there are more of us, sometimes there are more clubs, sometimes there are fewer. But all of us who participate in STAT are first and foremost members of local Soroptimist clubs. Now, STAT traces its roots back to a Soroptimist International of the Americas Federation-wide initiative in 2008 called Soroptimist Stop Trafficking, in which clubs throughout our federation were encouraged to speak out against human trafficking as one of the many forms of violence against women. And with all due respect to our prior speakers, I'm going to be using the term human trafficking and understanding, I hope you all do, that it is a very complex issue, including torture and other forms of horror against women. When this all came to pass, most of us in local clubs really did not know what we could do, aside from perhaps letters to the editor to raise awareness of the issue. There might be only 1 or 2 members in a club that were really interested in pursuing this issue. And so, you know, we weren't really sure what to do. But given our geography here in San Diego, with an international border with Mexico immediately to our south and the Pacific Ocean immediately to our west, we were aware of the possibilities for international trafficking. And of course, as our awareness grew, we learned that trafficking was also taking place within our borders. And it was really our local SI San Diego club that got the ball rolling in 2008 by inviting all of the San Diego area clubs to participate in a stop trafficking march through downtown San Diego, from the train station to the main courthouse, carrying signs and passing out leaflets. And our efforts were recognized in the June 2008 issue of Best for Women. We were pretty excited. But that was about it until January of 2010, which during National Human Trafficking Month, SI San Diego once again nudged us all to meet with local elected and appointed leaders as speakers, where 80 of us showed up, including the press. And they did it again in January 2011, another crowd. This was turning into a bit of a habit, and each of our clubs was learning more about the horrors of human trafficking. And about that time, we all became aware that our local district attorney, Bonnie DeManis, was among the first in the US to apply for federal funding to pursue and prosecute traffickers, which drew a lot of national attention to San Diego and to the issue of trafficking. The county, probably as a result of this funding, then sponsored a community forum on trafficking with approximately 100 people in attendance: survivors, prosecutors, service providers, researchers, the press. It was a really interesting and diverse group. And it's a group that has grown and morphed over time into a countywide coalition. And San Diego County, because of this early interest, has been a model for stopping trafficking. However, trafficking persists. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Among those first 100 at that meeting were about 20 Soroptimists. They were the largest single group of participants from several local clubs. And a few of them are featured prominently in the pictures I'm sharing with you today and remain active in STAT to this day. They looked around the room, and as Soroptimists do, they said, let's have lunch. And that lunch, one could say, gave birth to STAT. So STAT grew organically out of the convergence of a Soroptimist program, Soroptimist Stop Trafficking, and a demonstrated community need. But the first real STAT meeting was not until June of 2011, where Soroptimists tried to figure out how we fit into this overall picture of stopping trafficking in San Diego. This early group certainly recognized that Soroptimists were not equipped to be service providers, but we could connect with service providers to assist with some of their needs, and we could bring awareness to the issue through our network of members, friends, and supporters. And meanwhile, lots was happening in the anti-trafficking space throughout California. In 2012, petitions were underway to get a human trafficking sex offender registration initiative on the California ballot. So we circulated petitions like crazy in San Diego and participated in a countywide walk to bring awareness to the initiative. We were successful, and so was Prop 35. STAT's first really formal effort at awareness was a film screening in January of 2012, again during Human Trafficking Awareness Month. The film was called Indoctrinated, which we screened at 3 sites around San Diego. Seriously ambitious. But STAT was on a roll, and by this time, STAT was meeting monthly, sharing information gleaned as individual Soroptimist members spread out across various anti-trafficking action groups throughout the county, including the community committee of the San Diego Regional Advisory Council on Human Trafficking. That was the initial group where this thing all began. And we continued to raise awareness through our public film screenings. In 2013, we screened The Abduction of Eden. In 2014, the film was Chosen. In 2016, we screened Sold. In total, over 2,000 people throughout San Diego attended our screenings. Each screening was followed by a panel discussion, including local thought leaders and government officials such as our district attorney, our US attorney, federal, state, and city prosecutors, and law enforcement officers. STAT has also executed a variety of community projects, including converting a San Diego Police Department interview room to make it a welcoming and relaxing space for victim interviews. We've also funded local teen survivors to attend a youth leadership conference in Sacramento, our state capital. And in 2013, STAT began recognizing like-minded people businesses, and organizations throughout the county, which step forward on a volunteer basis to take a stand against modern-day slavery through an event that we call STAT Salutes Our Mission Heroes. This has become our signature annual event, where we also award many grants supplying financial assistance to a variety of local service providers. And those service providers' efforts are focused on women and girls to assist them in their efforts to help victims become survivors and to fight human trafficking. And it's been fun, and it's also been rewarding and educational. And each year, STAT also awards a Soroptimist Live Your Dream Award or two to survivors of human trafficking to help them and their dependents while they pursue their educational goals. This year, we'll be giving 2 Live Your Dream Awards, and we also contribute 10% of our fundraising proceeds to Soroptimist Club Giving. These are some of our stalwarts and our awardees. There we go. I love technology when it loves me back. So you can see we've been doing a lot. Now, STAT continues to cooperate with a variety of anti-trafficking community groups to build public awareness, take steps to decrease demand, and strengthen and improve services for victims and survivors. We leaflet at Comic-Con, the largest convention ever to take place in San Diego, and it's held annually, where STAT helps to bring awareness to convention attendees. In 2016, we co-sponsored the Southwest Conference Against Trafficking, which was held in San Diego. And we returned to leafleting during the Major League Baseball All-Star Game. And sponsored anti-trafficking posters on our trolley line and buses in the downtown convention area. We raise awareness about Soroptimist and about anti-trafficking through a variety of local street fairs and events. Early on, STAT received a Soroptimist Celebrating Success Award. And in 2020, STAT was honored by receiving the Hope Rising Award, which is given annually by Point Loma Nazarene University to honor local leaders in the anti-trafficking movement. Throughout the years, we have maintained close relationships with a community of governmental officials and NGOs working to combat trafficking. In 2020, we sponsored a webinar featuring our district attorney, Summer Stephan, discussing the dangers of trafficking, particularly to young women in a time of pandemic. And in 2021, we called upon local academic and journalism experts for another webinar about the disinformation being circulated on social media and groups such as QAnon about the true threats of trafficking. STAT and Soroptimist are well known and well respected throughout the anti-trafficking community in San Diego, which also has positive ripples through overlapping communities of education, media, government, and various NGOs. Now, we would love to be able to say that we have eliminated trafficking in San Diego, but the truth is we continue our fight against all forms of violence against women and girls, especially human trafficking and commercial sexual exploitation. Over the years, Soroptimists have chosen to refine our focus, and STAT continues to align with our Soroptimist mission of economic empowerment through access to education. STAT continues to impact the anti-trafficking space in San Diego County and to shine a positive light on the face of Soroptimists throughout our corner of the country. Thank you.
That was brilliant. Thank you so much, Sam. for showing us how we as Soroptimists can indeed have impact, and particularly in terms of supporting what service providers are doing and hugely raising awareness. So that is just brilliant. And
Thanks for
I
the
know that you will-
opportunity.
Well,
It was an
thank you
amazing
for joining us.
presentation. I just have you
So-
know, Suzanne, just sorry, just a minute. I think it's time if people have some questions, because we do have the time and we don't want to go on, you know, having speakers. We want to have it a little bit more engaging. If anyone has any questions to put in the chat, or if anyone has any questions for Sam and they would like to ask, I think this is an opportunity before we move on to our next speaker. If you have any questions, you can raise the hand option, or you can physically raise your hands and ask any questions that you have. Please go ahead. It's an opportunity to ask Sam any questions that you might have at this point of time. Anyone? No? So
well, think about it.
okay, so I do have a question for you, Sam, and I will go ahead. What I would like to know is that, is this something that you specifically do in the US? Because SI Toronto, especially over the past 2 years, we have been very actively engaged with raising awareness on this topic. We campaign about it. We support Caroline. She's not on the call, unfortunately, tonight, with her efforts of getting the survivors back to the community. And we have been working with another organization that helps women get out of prostitution and trafficking. So, and definitely you have a great track record. My question is this something exclusive for you and your gals, you know, in the US, or is there something like, you know, we can have a collaboration, you know, lessons learned, sharing information? I feel it would be great if we can have that learning from you instead of us trying to figure everything out on our own here in Canada.
Yeah, it's hard to recreate the wheel, isn't it? Sure, we're an open book. We'd be happy to share what we have learned over time. Our situation, as I said, grew organically, and STAT grew at the same time the anti-trafficking movement was growing in San Diego because of the light that was shining on us. But we're more than happy to share what we've learned. And I think the secret to our success has been relationships with governmental leaders, with other NGOs. We participate in what they do, they participate in what we do, and we all honor each other. And I think that's how this has really grown.
That's wonderful. I just want to go back to one thing that you mentioned, and I loved it. And it's the fact that we can do all this work and we can still focus on our projects, because sometimes I feel some of the clubs worry that, you know what, we always talk about the dream programs should be the focus. But honestly, to me personally, I think we do have, as you mentioned, especially in Toronto, and I think that other clubs can definitely speak to that as well. We do have winners who are survivors of trafficking.
Right.
And again, when we talk about the younger demographic, they are in the danger of being trafficked. So I don't see any problem with doing both. I think somehow one provides and one supports the other one. And I think that's how we can move ahead and be successful.
Well, I think you're right, Estatera. These things overlap. Things are not siloed. You don't have, trafficking on the one hand and women who need education on the other. These things overlap. And so what our attempt has been is to acknowledge the work that we are doing through our DREAM programs and to bring that knowledge into the trafficking space so that we can honor those women who are rising above their circumstances and forging forward.
Yeah, thank you. I think Dilpreet had her hand up. Dilpreet, go ahead, ask your question.
Thank you so much. So I have a question. So when we are talking about awareness about human trafficking and taking torture as well, as we all know, we live in multicultural. There's multi-diversity, different cultures are living here, different people from all over the world are living in America and in Canada. So there's a lot of torture and trafficking happening inside the house. People are they can be their family members, they can be It can be a brother, it can be an uncle and stuff like that. But the girls or the women, they're even so scared to tell their parents or anyone, because they're like, in some cultures, like if something goes wrong to you, you become a dishonor to your family. Because of that, it goes for a very long period of their life and they're not able to say. And even sometimes they're so sometimes tortured, or like very horrible things happening to them inside the house. We're spreading awareness about like people outside, but like sometimes it's happening inside the house where you're living with someone who is 24/7. You are seeing that person, you know that person is doing something wrong to you, and which is like very stressful to them. So I just want to know, like, what can we do for them? Because sometimes, like, if I keep myself in their position and like I am sitting in front of I know I'm living with my family and I'm very unsafe and I am getting tortured, or I am getting, like something bad is happening to me, and I cannot speak. I am suppressed every single day. I'm in a trauma and a lot of things happening to me. So I always have like, what should we do? Like, we don't know what everyone is going through. We don't know, like, it can be my friend, it can be my neighbor. So what should we do for that? And that question always like haunts me. Like, what if like person living next to me is like going through a horrible thing, and like I am sitting here and cannot do anything about it. And later on, I know like that person has committed suicide or like has died with something. Yeah.
I think perhaps this is a question better answered by Linda and Jean. We would be, in STAT, we would be supporting any efforts that might be going on through the schools or any local agencies that would do that. But I suspect that Linda and Jean have some firsthand experience with that. And I'd love to hear what they have to say about it.
There also like some, I will complete one more thing, add one more thing to it. Are there also like some 24/7 helpline centers they can, like, if we can spread more awareness about it, spread more word about it. So like a lot of women know that, they can secretly call them and be like, okay, I need help. And like somewhere like we can spread like more of that numbers outside. So like all over the world, because thousands, millions, trillions of women all over the world, they just suffering horrible things right now. So yeah. That's all my question.
Thank you, Dilpreet. Let me just barge in here for a moment. I think Sam's correct that Linda and Jean will have some notions about that, and that's actually a huge question that we should pay more attention to as a follow-up. And Miriam, I know you have your hand raised, and I'm going to ask you to just put that on hold so that we can hear from our final speaker before we get too late here. So we'll go to you first, Miriam, right after Yannicka. And now
sorry, Suzanne, before we move on, do you want Linda and Jean to very quickly answer the question, and then we're going to move on to the next speaker?
Okay,
very
Linda's
briefly.
put something. Yeah, Linda's put something in the chat line. So
she has put in the hotline. So the answer to your question is that there is hotline, Dilpreet. But
I could just say that it's a key, if you know someone that is being trafficked or tortured, is to tell them that you believe them, that you care about them, and tell them that they could, if they have a computer, they could contact us online or the hotline, that they're not alone, that there's many people in the world that are enduring the same crime. But I think to tell them that you believe them is really important, the first thing. And they need to start reaching out. They need to have support to go to the police, and have support to get, they might not want to go to the police right away, but support to start telling their story and break free somehow, and that there's hope. And we have a website if they want to. I'll put our website in the chat as well.
And I would add to that, that we have to talk, and what I see happening in Canada is that when the police are talking about human trafficking, they're really focused on teenagers often, or young women. They don't bring in the fact that trafficking starts with infants and with children. And they also don't bring in that it could be spousal. So it's education. It's really important because many of the women that we have relational connection with, like they said, if it was talked, the full extent of human trafficking was talked about openly in schools and say for prenatal class, because some of the women that we talked to had children and they had babies and they went to prenatal class, and prenatal class says, go to your family. And if they don't understand what they've endured is not normal, then we had one woman tell us, I took my babies to my parents because that's what went on in prenatal class. She said, because I still was not educated enough to know that what was done to me had a name. And I could, if somebody had have educated me about what the meaning of non-state torture is, I would have learned that probably before I even had children. And we've had contact with several men who said that they married women who were disassociative and had no idea that their wives were taking their children to their families because they didn't understand the degree of harm that can be going on. So that's a critical piece for us, is to really open up the door that it's from infancy to older women, and the family is one of the most dangerous places on this planet, really, for women and children all over the world, because that's where abuse happens, that's where the torture is happening, that's where the traffic is happening, that's where the femicide, you know, the majority of women that are killed and children are within homes. So my take is that we have to be very honest in how we educate about human trafficking.
That's a great point, Jean. Thank you so much. Now, we heard what Soroptimists in the San Diego area are doing about trafficking, and now we're going to turn to Canada. And I want to introduce Janneke Lewis, who was trained as a lawyer in South Africa, where she prosecuted, she's told me, over 300 child abuse and rape cases. She's been a member of Soroptimist of North and West Vancouver since 1992, except for the time she spent in Scotland, where she was a member of SI Glasgow. And Janneke has been a governor of Western Canada region and has represented Soroptimist at numerous international conferences on human trafficking. In 2009, she spearheaded a petition to the government to bring the Nordic model to Canada. And that petition ultimately went to Member of Parliament Joy Smith and ultimately led to PACIPA, which is the Nordic Model Bill. So, Janneke, tell us about PACIPA and what advocacy means to you.
Oh, you're on mute.
I'm not thinking clearly. Thank you, Governor Suzanne, for that. I'm not going to tell you about PACIPA today specifically, but I'm going to tell you how we got to the change and what the process was to get to the change, and then also talk a little bit about what advocacy is as opposed to being political, because that seems to be a topic at the moment. And my story, although the petition was in 2008 or 9, my story starts in 2002, and I'm going to go back to the beginning just to show you that there is a progression to advocacy. It's not an instant, it's not instant, trust me. So in 2002, I attended the international conference, Soroptimist International Conference in Sydney, Australia. I was governor at the time, and I met with somebody called Roswitha Benish, who was one of the 2 Soroptimist representatives at the UN in Vienna. And we had some discussions, I had been a criminal lawyer both in South Africa and in Canada, and we had discussions, and as it always happens, I ended up agreeing to help her with the UN conference that was scheduled for 2005 in Bangkok. And I literally thought that we were going to be writing letters to people to get them to go to the conference or speak at the conference, or I don't know what I was going to be doing. A year later, she contacted me and said, could you do the presentation at the conference, please? The topic is prosecuting child traffickers. Well, I still had a little bit of time, so I spent quite a lot of time gaining knowledge about the topic so that I could speak about it. Human trafficking at that time, including trafficking through prostitution, had not been included in the criminal code. It was recognized in some of the immigration laws. So it was recognized in 2000, 2001 by the Palermo Protocol by the United Nations, and then countries ratify that, and then they add it to their own laws. So I spent a year researching the topic, put together the presentation, and it was not as easy as researching these days because it wasn't on the books of most countries. And basically my information came anecdotally through newspaper articles and the odd article that had been written, the odd paper that had been written. In Bangkok, where the conference was, an interesting place for a conference on human trafficking, I'll say, because you could see it happening around you. There were a group of Soroptimists from Thailand, Sweden, Czech Republic, and various other countries in Europe. After the presentation, months after the presentation, I was invited to represent SI at an NGO meeting in Vienna and in Courmayeur, which is in Italy. And from all of these interactions, and every time I'd have to write a report, of course, because I'm doing this on behalf of Soroptimist, to SI and SIA, we became aware of the Nordic model. This is the model first adopted by Sweden to decriminalize the selling of sex and criminalizing the purchase of sex, and was then adopted by other Nordic countries before it's now been adopted by a bunch more. I brought all of, so SI then drafted a position paper, which I helped them with respect to human trafficking and to our position with respect to prostitution. And SI then adopted the Nordic model. I brought this knowledge back to the region and did a lot of advocacy work, raised awareness through speaking publicly at Soroptimist events and non-Soroptimist events, worked a lot with the Salvation Army. It's important to do research about any topic for which you want to advocate. You really need to become aware and gain a lot of knowledge about it. So in approximately 2008 or 9, so this is almost 7 years after the first meetings that I'd had back in Australia, the Western Canada region decided to petition the government and to make changes to the criminal code to adopt the Nordic model. I drafted the petition, and club members spent a further 2 years collecting approximately 6,000 signatures. In 2009, I think it was we did it basically in BC, so there's no BC region, if you like, but a number of clubs in BC held a fundraising event, and we raised money for the Salvation Army home. That it was the first home to help trafficked women, victims of trafficking. It was very secret, very specialized and safe house, basically. So we raised money for them, at the same time raising awareness. We had speakers like Victor Malarick from W5, who's written a number of books about human trafficking and has rescued victims of human trafficking. And innovative, I know it sounds very silly today, but innovatively, SI Edmonton joined us by video. It was very high tech. Today we've got Zoom, but we didn't have Zoom. And so basically, we had this high tech, very excited to have somebody from out of province join this event. And we raised $20,000 that evening, apart from raising awareness. During my speaking engagements that I started, once you get started with one, you get invited to another and so on and so forth. I learned about Joy Smith, who's the MP, and that she was also interested in promoting the Nordic model. So Joy was the MLA for a riding in Manitoba. And she was also a member of the Conservative Party, which was the, let's call it governing or majority party in Canada at that time while we were trying to promote this Nordic model. I connected with her and told her about the petition. She then asked if she could adopt the petition and translate it into French. I hadn't thought about that, of course, being in BC, just being so Anglophone. So after we collected the more than 6,000 signatures, I met up with Joy at a conference or speaking event in Vancouver and handed her the petitions. In 2011 or 12, and I'm not sure of the year anymore, she tabled a private member's bill to make changes to the criminal code and to adopt the Nordic model. And this bill then eventually became law as PACIPA, which was adopted and approved by Parliament in December of 2014. So you can see this was a very long process, wasn't instant at all. But I'd like to think that those 6,000 signatures made a difference and helped get the bill to Parliament. So there's a couple of things to note from that story. It's one is that ordinary people can petition the government. The government, elected by the people, should listen to the people. Approximately 1,500 petitions are sent to the House of Commons annually. The procedure for petitions in the House of Commons is set out on the government website, and I should have given Estatira some notice, but can you bring up that page for me, please? And I'll carry on just talking.
Yes, you carry on. I'm just going to bring it up in a second, okay?
Okay. So something else to remember is that we have a federal federal laws here. So we have federal government, as you know, and provincial government. So you need to pick your forum correctly. You need to, if something is federal, like the criminal code, then you petition the House of Parliament. If it's something that's provincial, then you petition the MLAs and your particular parliament, provincial parliament. Do you have it? Okay. So there is a procedure. It's just one little page, but there is a procedure on the government website, the House of Commons website, telling you exactly how to do a petition. And it also gives you the format for a petition. I haven't got the format up here, but I have the website. If you go to ourcommons.ca, then you can find the method and the language which to use. So have a look at this. This is actually quite surprising. They, of course, now have electronic petition that wasn't available back in 2009 for some reason. But a paper petition, you need to create it using the format. You then gather the signatures and you send it to a member of parliament. It doesn't have to be your member of parliament. I would say send it to a member of parliament of the governing party, because it's no point doing it to the other. I mean, you can do it to the other people, but the governing party is going to get that through parliament. And what surprised me is that you only need 25 signatures for it to be certified by the clerk of petitions, which means any club basically could petition the government. Now, I think if you're going to try to make any changes, try to get a few more than 25. 6,000 was a very good number and clearly indicated, and I'm sure that Joy Smith got more, that indicated that there was a significant amount of Canadians, because you have the only other stipulation is you have to be Canadian to sign a petition. You can't be a resident. So the more signatures you get, the more important the topic might be, or the more people are indicating that they want the change that's being proposed to be made. And then it's up to the MP, and that you can see that having met Joy Smith earlier, building that little bit of a relationship, she was actually working in the same way, finding her. That's what helped get this petition through Parliament. And then that person tables it either as sort of from the government or as a private member's bill. And then you just have to wait and see. But it's not a quick fix by any means at all. Thanks, Estatira. So if anybody's intending to bring a petition to Parliament, pick an issue, research it very carefully and decide what the desirable end would be, what the success would look like. We didn't get everything we asked, but that's life. We got most of it. Have a committee and a budget. Decide how to reach the desirable end, either by letter writing. You can't just send in a petition and hope for the best. You've got to create that awareness. You've got to create awareness in your community, and that community could be like West Vancouver, it could be BC, or it could be more than that. And hold public events, advertise in the media if you can. We didn't do that, but we did hold public events, which were advertised. Actually, I got onto the Christy Clark show to talk about it. I can't remember how that happened, but I did. And so that was really handy. I think they were more interested in talking to Victor Malarick, and I promised to get Victor Malarick on the show. And then during the interview, which was only about 6 days before the event, I didn't have a MC, and I cheekily asked Christy Clark if she would do it, and she did. So it all helps. And then she was invested, of course, in promoting it, because she was going to be there. So all these kinds of things help a little bit. So very quickly, what is the difference between advocacy and being political? And I've deliberately told you about the parties and which party Joyce Smith was representing. I haven't told you, and I'm not going to tell you which party I vote for, generally speaking, because that doesn't actually matter, and that's really the point. The issue of advocacy as being opposed to being political arose this year, specifically at the time that Roe versus Wade was being overturned, and I'm going to deal with that head on, because we sort of skirt over that. The US Supreme Court overturned Roe versus Wade, which, and I'm not a US lawyer, and I haven't read Roe versus Wade, I don't really intend to, which I understand it means that the right for women to have access to abortion is no longer protected, and each state can adopt their own law. In the US, there's a division between pro-life and pro-choice, and unfortunately, it seems to have gone down party lines for the most part. And this is why it is now perceived to be political. But it's really a human rights issue. It's whether or not a woman has the right to choose. So to some, it appears that to take a stand one way or the other is to promote the political party above the other, and I disagree with that. So I'm going to have a look at Soroptimist International states as its purpose this. SI advocates for human rights and gender equality through education and empowerment. At the heart of Soroptimist International's advocacy is its work across 7 United Nations centers, in which 21 representatives ensure that the voices of women and girls around the world are included in international decision-making. Soroptimist International collaborates with other like-minded organizations on issues of mutual concern, working together towards our common aspirations for women. The UN representatives can advocate and effectively on behalf of women and girls as a result of evidence provided by every Soroptimist taking direct action at the local level. So we are encouraged through the international organization to advocate for change and for human rights and for gender equality. So if an issue offends one of those areas, then we must advocate for a change. So if it offends gender equality or human right, the right to choose, we have to. And it doesn't mean that you're putting your party aside necessarily, just disagreeing with it on that particular point. Advocacy is key to our organization. That's what we do. Our goal is to strive for human rights, for equality, for the best for women and girls. The principles of SI are the advancement of the status of women, high ethical standards, human rights for all, equality, development, and peace, and the advancement of international understanding, goodwill, and peace. Advocacy is the act or process of supporting a cause or proposal. Any advocacy work must promote the principles of Soroptimist International. As Soroptimists, we strive to improve the lives of women and girls, irrespective of political parties. Advocacy means we challenge lawmakers and politicians. We write to MPs and MLAs. Now, here's the main difference between being political and advocating. If I were to suggest to my fellow Soroptimists that we all vote for Party A in the next election, because that will ensure we vote for the person running for Party A in each of our ridings in the next election, because I know that Party A will promote a particular cause that we have and it'll be easier to get it passed through Parliament. That's being political. We don't do that as Soroptimists. Voting for your person of choice is your democratic right and it's a private matter. But as I've demonstrated, see, once that a person is an MP, they work for everybody in that riding. They don't ask you whether or not you voted for them. They don't ask you if you're riding, you know, whatever your MP, whichever party he represents. Once that person is in that position, you can go to them and ask them to make changes in government. You can go to them and speak to them, and I know that, for example, the person that represents us in West Vancouver, I know people who belong to the opposite party who had half-an-hour meetings with the MP. That it doesn't matter anymore what party they belong to. They're working for you in the riding, and you can contact them. You can go to them with their issues, and you can write to them as a club, and that is the advocacy part. It's not being political. Any questions? Thank you.
That was great.
That
Thank
was
you very
brilliant.
much, Yannicka. I just had one sentence from you and I like that. I put it in the chat. I said, advocacy is challenging the ideas. And sometimes we forget that that idea can come from anyone, someone we have elected as an official and someone we haven't elected. And I think that's the biggest confusion. At least I can speak. And I think, probably others can talk to that as well. I think that's where we can open the floor for discussion. But one very specific case that you were also aware was when we were trying to get, one simple statement of support for Iranian women. And it really, really took Soroptimist 6 or 7 weeks to send one statement to say that we are in solidarity. And the problem was that, they were all number one scared, I would say, because they were scared that they will fall into the part that they are political. And I think that's an important distinction to make. We advocate. Thank you. I'm just leaving it to you, Suzanne.
No, absolutely. And I think that, it's really strange how we have got to a point where we're scared of offending somebody. Oh, they might leave Soroptimist, or we can't offend them. If somebody is against women's rights, frankly, they're offending me, and we need to take a stand. That's what our organization is. We're not the WI, we have to take a stand. That's what we do.
Thank you so much, Yannicka. And I think, as Susan Gilby says, that was the best explanation I've ever heard of the differences between advocacy and politicization. Now, I'm very conscious, Miriam's been waiting with her raised hand for 15 minutes. And so I just want to say a couple of things. I'm going to have to dash out for a few minutes, but we do want to open the floor. And we could spend another hour and a half on questions. So I'll stop talking. Miriam, please ask your question.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for that opportunity, and thank you for making that awesome webinar happen. My question from Sam was, are we having enough resources for the survivors, women who they've been trafficked, they've been abused? How are we going to support them? Considering this subject is a very sensitive subject, and we know this business is very one of those horrifying dark businesses who people doesn't like, the people in that groups as mafia and gangs, they don't let the victim run away easily, and they are shadowing them for a long time. This is one question I have. And second thing was, like, as my homie Statira said, the situation for women in Iran getting horrifying day by day, and we are looking for immediate action. We didn't get the action we need right now. And Eugenic brought up the abortion subject up. Right now, many of our girls who they got arrested in the street, they are going to jail, they get raped, and if they have access out, they are just asking for birth control pills, or they say like they got pregnant and they don't know what they should do in this situation. They don't know how long they're gonna stay in the jail, what's gonna be their result, and how that's revolution gonna happen. Is there any chance they get released? What's gonna happen? The another thing was, by the Sharia law, if they are virgin, which is supposed to be by our tradition, before marriage they can't have sex activities. If they are virgin, first by Sharia law's approval, they rape these girls, then they are getting killed by the law of like whatever they decide. We want this be recognized in the UN, and we are asking for our awesome supportive members of the Soroptimist in all the clubs. And I'm very blessed to having our governor, Suzanne Heron, who being very supportive for the Iranian by letting us to stand as a voice of women. Thank you so much.
I think the first part of your question, Miriam, was directed towards my remarks and about, are there enough resources? And I can make it really short. No, there aren't. However, this is a perfect opportunity for Soroptimists to advocate for victims locally to the most local of your governments, your city, your county, whatever it might be. It's a perfect opportunity for you to get to know your legislators and your elected officials and advocate for funds for women who are survivors.
Thank you very much for the answer, Sam.
Thank you, Sam.
Yeah, if I can add to that, and then we can go and see if anyone would like to unmute themselves and ask questions or share comments. I agree that, you know, this is one of the most profitable businesses in the world. We know that. And I think what is important for us is to find, as was mentioned before, find the organizations that are supporting victims. But I have spoken to some of them, Sam, and what we notice here, at least in Canada and in Ontario, I can speak to Ontario in Canada, is that there is a huge gap between what the government says that they provide and what the victims get. And I think, as you mentioned, if we can have something like a more streamlined process, we do have newer clubs coming up. So if we can come up with a more structured approach, like how to approach your, let's say, MPs, what kind of content. Some people might not be very familiar with the language of law, and I think it's important to have the correct terminology. If we can come up with a how to move ahead, because I feel if I want to go and talk to my MPs, I get very excited. Obviously, I have the energy, but do I have the right, do I have the right terminology, or do I have all the knowledge that I need to move ahead? Probably I need some help and support. Maybe if all the clubs who have gone and approached their MPs can share something, so we can have a streamlined, one template, one document that all clubs can share, all clubs can use. I know many clubs are scared of even thinking about this. This is not something that is easy for so many reasons. Number one, the idea of advocating, the idea of going ahead and, have to deal with human trafficking or sex trafficking heads on is scary for people. So if we can provide them with the resources, that would be wonderful. Having resources given to people will equip them with the knowledge to start and then have ongoing support.
Who else would like to put their hand up and either make a comment or ask one of our extraordinary speakers? And yes, we do have so much to learn.
I see in the chat there, someone mentioned about petitioning the UN around Iran. And the UN met this week about Iran. I shared the video with Estatir. I don't know. They voted on a special intervention. So you don't need to petition the UN, but it would be good to follow up on what they're doing, because it's the first time that they've had a conversation about Iran at the UN in this way. It was very moving. It would be powerful for you to watch it I'd highly recommend it.
Well, the problem with that is, it will take some time, and what we need is immediate action. So always what happens at international level is that we need immediate action. And today I was watching the news before we logged onto webinar, and I was thinking of our next webinar. We do have a webinar coming up on 10th of December on the Human Rights Day, and we will talk about the violation of human rights in Iran, in Afghanistan, and in Ukraine. I have been in touch with our Ukrainian club, and we will hopefully have great stories to share with you. But what I can speak about Iran myself, and I'm sure that Mariam feels the same sentiment, we live a pain every day. And this is something that I feel many people cannot understand. We live that pain every single day. And I sometimes feel that I can't do this anymore. I can't turn on the news. I can hear it. I turn on the news and I can hear that there are 40 people killed. And yes, the United Nations has its own system, but the problem is it takes so long and we can't afford to lose more people. And what can be done? As I was sharing with you, it is very difficult to get something, even with the Soroptimist. This is Soroptimist. This is the global voice of women. And to just get one statement, we had to work for 6 or 7 weeks, and I want to extend my appreciation to my Toronto club. They were amazing. The statement of the support that I got from them was phenomenal. But I know that in Eastern Canada, at least, we really need to talk about advocacy, because many clubs are not comfortable. And it's all new stuff for them. We have to make sure that everyone gets on the same page so we can move on. And this is part of the work that Soroptimist does. I feel we joined Soroptimist because we wanted to be the global voice, right?
Yeah, I didn't mean, I
think that
I just wanted to follow up. I didn't mean to say that the UN is doing something that you shouldn't do.
No.
I just thought it saved people going there. That's already something. You don't need to do that. You follow what Estatir is saying, because the UN is their path they're already following. That's all I meant.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, I'm just sharing, what's going on. And I see, Yannicka, you have your hand up. Please go ahead.
Yeah, I feel sort of, I don't know enough about Iran. Yes, we see bits on the news, but these are it's filtered, right? What we get here in the West is being filtered, and I don't speak Farsi or any other language, so that I can't understand it. My legal assistant is Iranian, and she described it to me saying, "Have you read the Handmaid's Tale?" Which I actually can't get past the second episode because it's too horrific for me. But she says that's what life is like for women in Iran, and I thought that was probably a really good way of trying to bring it home to Canadians, when because I hear bits and pieces about all the restrictions that are on women. It's not just the headdress, it's not just the going in the street and that kind of things, other things as well that I don't fully have a grasp of, although we're trying. So I'd love to advocate or suggest, maybe not one-on-one, but sort of communications between people who have inside knowledge and the rest of us who are trying to understand it, have coffee conversations where we can learn from each other. Well, don't learn from me, but I would be like to learn from other people about exactly what is going on, so that I can better advocate for that and for that change. I think that would be really good. But you're right, it takes too long. We need to get in there now.
Thank you for mentioning that. I think Mariam has her hand up, and I would like to hear from her. And you mentioned something interesting. So Mariam, let's go over to you.
Thank you for the another opportunity. I wanted briefly say what's going on in Iran if another members didn't hear about it. So whatever happening right now, because of the censorship of the media, we don't see too much in the news or another platform, except some videos comes out, and we can use it in our personal pages and inform the people. The thing is, in the past almost 4 years, Iran's government, since after the kingdom, they put the law, they made a very messed up combined by the Shariat. And right now, how they showing out is just like some new generation, some young people who they are not happy with their dress coding or the law government gives, and show them they are just came out to cause a problem and troublemakers. The reality is, we are talking about human rights violation in Iran. Is not regarding any religion or dress coding, is attacking people, very basic rights. Doesn't matter, women, men, children, elders, they're killing everyone. You don't see and you don't hear it because of the limitation, and like coverage of the news is not complete or is not good enough. Internet is blocked in Iran, and people who has a VPN access, they can send some of the videos out. You can see and hear still about the Ukraine, whatever happening there. You think about the wars in Iran, but you can see. For Ukraine is like Russia attacking from outside, is out of the border war, but for us is inside war. The government is against of people and killing. You can see the war tanks, guns, shotguns in the streets. They shooting to the cars who just passing, killing the kids. Whatever right now we have, at least is 58 children, child, minors that killed, and many of them, they don't have even access. We don't have released names, even we know how many people got killed. So if we give that time to just the procedures and like an office step by steps, the policies, we're gonna lose many brilliant people, which this loss is not gonna have any healing and repair. So we are asking, just advocate us, be our voice, be Iranian voice, and help us to educate the community regarding what's happening to Iran, and be their voice. At least they take action, immediate action, to bring that damage lower than whatever is right now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mariam. I see that Cheryl and Jean have their hand up. Let's go to Cheryl first.
Thanks, Estatira. I want to point out that it may seem that I thought, geez, me and technology don't get along.
No, you're well. You're doing well. You're
okay. So anyhow,
sure.
What I wanted to say is, if you listen to the speaker about how long it took to advocate to bring in that law about Sweden had invoked, it takes time, and people need to be educated and so forth. The fact that SIA and SI were slower to take action with regard to the situation in Iran is unfortunate, but it is a learning experience. And I think instead of dwelling on that part, like the delay, I think the statement was well written, kind of thing. And I'm sure that there's no inference here to compare Soroptimists and what their family members are going through in Ukraine versus Soroptimists who know a family and so forth, what they're doing in Iran. It is horrific. And so I think we need to work on this advocacy and the education about the difference between political and advocating, but also recognizing that atrocities have been done through history, and it's not right. It's upsetting, and it's not going to be healed overnight. But I think if we can temper down the emotion just a tidge, maybe we can come up with a really good suggestion to move move in the right direction a little quicker for everyone. Thank you.
I think Jean has her hand up. Let's go to Jean. Jean?
Yes, I was just going to say something like Cheryl. For Linda and I in Canada, we've been at this 30 years to trying to get a law in Canada that would recognize the non-state torture of women and girls. So what we've had to do is to recognize it for every woman on this planet and every girl on this planet. There's, in my opinion, there's not such a thing as democracy. We have patriarchy and we have misogyny. And those two issues are a constant in the violation of human rights. And as sad as it is, it takes a lot of patience and it takes a lot to try not to take it too personal and understand that it's evolution in spite of the atrocities that are going on. It's not just, and it can never excuse it, but also we have to keep standing so we don't burn out, because if we burn out, then there's nobody to stand. So talking and trying to find ways to get our message out, but all the same time, be able to take care of ourselves so that we can stand the walk we have to walk.
That was great idea. And I think Dawn Marie has something shared in the chat and Dilpreet has her hand up. I would like to just make a small comparison between what has happened in Iran, and that's why you see us being very vocal. The number of the people killed over the past, let's say, 3 months is more than the number of the people killed in the Ukrainian war. And you can imagine that people are out there with empty hands. So this is a situation that's a human rights crisis, and that's why the United Nations had a session on it. It is something that requires urgent care, and we understand at Soroptimist, but what we are asking is being more, responsive to the situation. So this time we were able to get this statement, which is great, which is wonderful, but we are hoping that in the future we can be more responsive. Yannicka, you asked what can you do, and one of the things that Governor Suzanne suggested and was great is what is happening to women and not only women, the human rights violation in conflict zones. We all know that in conflict zones, sexual violence and rape is a weapon. It's used as a weapon. So in the next webinar that we will have about Afghanistan, Ukraine, Iran, and we do have the Soroptimist representative in United Nations, and that's a very exciting webinar. And if I can interest everyone, Mariam is going to be one of the speakers. We will both talk about what is happening in Iran in more detail. So I'm just going to stop talking about Iran and go back to Dilpreet with a question. Go ahead, Dilpreet.
I just, it's not usually a question, but it's just like a comment what Jean said right now. And what Esther was saying, like, it took us 6 weeks to get a statement. And like, sometimes, process takes a lot of time and stuff like that. That's why we have our organizations like this who are supporting for human rights. So I just feel like we all need to come forward. If there is any issue for related to human rights, it's not about Iran, it's not about Ukraine, it's about any issue which we're working for human rights. We all should come together and stand for it. And I have a little story to share about it. Like 3 to 4 weeks ago, I met a woman. She just moved from Ukraine to here where I live right now. In the war, she lost her father, her mother, her husband, and she was the only survivor. Like in the war, she lost, and she came here, and now she's working here in a restaurant. She's with her 2 kids, and then it's been only 6 months she has been here. She's very new here, but like the thing is, like, even though the people, those who have come here after the war, don't have a lot of resources, don't have a lot of people to talk to, there is. Just feel it this way, they have seen their homes destroyed in front of them and they're brought to a new country. And so I feel like there should be something like we can still talk to those people, like still have some sources for them so we can talk to them, provide them a comfort when they're coming to a new country, something like that. So it will be helpful. And for the Iran and for all of the human rights issue, we all should come forward in future, learn from this thing and come forward and speak together for all the people?
Thank you, Dilpreet. Jean, you have your hand up. I'm not sure if it's from the last time or you still have something to say. I'm not sure. But what I would like to ask, and we still have time for a discussion, is from what we heard, Linda and Jean, if someone inflicts torture on a woman, it is not a crime. So sometimes people will not, you know, I mean, for people who are not into law, it might be difficult, and I can probably ask Yannicka or any of you. So how is this dealt with? If someone goes and someone reaches out to the officials and say they have been the victim of torture, so if it is not a crime, are there any charges? What is the punishment for those people who inflict any form of torture?
Well, it depends on where you live. Like if you live where Sam is in California, there is a law against non-state torture. And Jean put that in the chat. I don't know if you saw that, Sam, but we've been trying to encourage women in California to use that law. If there's human trafficking and the women have identified they're being tortured, it's a beautiful law for them to use, and it gives more value to their voice. They can describe the torture in court, and it's a law that's a gift for them to use. In Canada, we don't have a law against non-state torture. So if a woman identifies as being a torture survivor, she'd be told that it's assault or aggravated assault. And Jean and I have been going to the Canadian government through many different parties, conservative and liberal. So we're not party specific. Neither party have wanted to change our criminal code to include non-state torture as a crime. They have state torture specifically named in our criminal code, and we want to have it amended to have state and non-state torture both. So right now, women are being discriminated against. They're being told that no, what's happening to you, even if you're electric shocked, even if you're waterboarded, tortured, if you're gang raped, we're going to call it assault and aggravated assault. But if a person was tortured by the state, excuse me, of the police department, if you were tortured in the police department with electric shocking and water torture, then it would be called state. And most times the victims of state torture are men. So it's discriminatory in our opinion that women and girls it's seen as a lesser crime when it happens to women and girls. And even our last attorney general and this one, a woman who was a feminist still agreed with the patriarchy that torture for women should be misnamed as assault or aggravated assault. And Minister Lamenti, the same thing. He told us that one child is too many, but yet there's an article coming out in December where he's still playing the patriarchal line of no, when it happens to women and girls, it's assault or aggravated assault. There's women around the world that are on this call, I think, so I don't know. Some countries do have a law against torture, and there's some states in the United States besides California. So we're still pushing for that, and we haven't given up on it.
So have you petitioned for it? Is that something that Soroptimist can support you on? Because I think that's an important cause and that's a great advocacy work. So
we had a private members bill and everything go through, but you can contact your members of parliament, and there's a group of women in Toronto now that are lobbying their member of parliament, pushing again to have the criminal code changed to include non-state torture. So yes, the more of civil society that speaks out, the better it will be. And you can,
that's wonderful. That's wonderful.
Is there a stronger penalty if it's torture as versus assault? So what is the so from your point of view, why do you want it to be named torture as opposed to assault?
Because it's a different crime, and so there's different suffering. Women that endure torture, assault is about controlling a person, and torture is about destroying the woman's sense of self. Yeah. So they're often much more harmed, and they need more extensive care
than someone who's just punched. Or knife, for example.
Right. Yeah. And there's no data on it then. That means the crime's invisible because there's no law to name the data, and there's no specialized services. But yet, if I was a torture survivor from another country, came here as an immigrant and said that I was tortured, they would take me into the torture center in Toronto. But if a woman identifies that her husband tortured her in her family, they'd say, no, it's because it's not state torture. We can't help you.
Okay, thank you for the clarification.
Okay.
Thank you very much for that. Now I have a closing poll. I would like to ask everyone to answer the poll before we close the session tonight. So if you can go ahead and answer the questions in the poll, we were going to take all of that into consideration in terms of improving the quality of our future webinar. One more minute before I close the poll and share the results with you. Okay, so I hope you can see the results. So what is interesting here is that we do have takeaway. Let me just quickly click on the details so we can see the takeaway for tonight. Sorry. Can everyone see the takeaway on the screen? Yes or no?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. So thank you very much for answering the poll. And we hope that this webinar provided you with some insight into the great work that our Soroptimist members are doing in different parts of the world. In the US, their advocacy work, here in Canada, and in other parts, the great work that they do in terms of supporting women with the resources. We do have the Live Your Dream Award, which can be life-changing. Just a little bit of background information. Caroline, who is an activist, is a winner of our Live Your Dream Award. So we can see the impact that we make as Soroptimists. And I think we should never underestimate the power of women when they come together and when they unite. So I would like to thank all of you who spent this evening with us on the start of the campaign of 16 Days of Activism. We know that the violence against women is a pandemic. It is going on. And we hope that this was an opportunity to hear about the great work that Linda and Jean, Yannicka and Sam are doing. So thank you very much, everyone. And we are looking forward to seeing you on 10th of December, the International Human Rights Day. As I said, we are going to talk about the violation of human rights and what is happening to women and girls in specific in Iran, Afghanistan, and in Ukraine. So all the best and have yourself a wonderful evening. Thank you very much for logging in. The recording will be posted on Soroptimist International of Toronto YouTube channel, as well as Western Canada's YouTube channel. You will also get a longer survey in mail, so we appreciate your responses to that. Thank you very much and good night.
Thank you, everyone. It's lovely to
Bye-bye.
be well.
Good night.
Good night.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
I see there was a question left in there, yes, about our book in schools.
Yeah,
Mothers have given it to their teenagers, and the teenagers have really said they should be reading it.